Uganda is a landlocked country in East Africa, former protectorate of the British Empire. With its over 49 million population, predominantly Christian and Muslims. Winston Churchill called it the Pearl of Africa for its beauty, abundant wildlife, and diversity. But that's not the focus on today's edition of The Agenda. We will try and interrogate the impact of Western influence and the interests of Africa as it seeks to assert itself. Welcome to the program. My name is Henry Williams. Join us after the break. This is LN 24/7. All right, welcome to The Agenda, and today we'll be looking at the issue of Uganda's anti-gay law and Western influence in Africa. Our talking points will take us to the questions we will be posing today as we discuss Western influence on African culture. Also, we'll be looking at Africa's sovereignty and neocolonialism. And finally, lastly but not the least, we will be interrogating the balance of power. Is Africa having a fair exchange in this relationship? And these are the issues. But first of all, in a background to our discussion, President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda in May signed a law tagged one of the world's strictest anti-homosexuality measures, drawing widespread condemnation from within the country and internationally. Although same-sex relations were already illegal in Uganda, as they are in more than 30 African countries, the new law went much further in targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people. It imposed capital punishment for some behavior, including gay sex with HIV positive, and stipulated a 20-year sentence for promoting homosexuality. Let's take a listen from President Yoweri Museveni.
I want to congratulate the honorable members of parliament on your stand on the Ebitingwa. Congratulations. I congratulate you for that strong stand. It is good that you rejected the pressure from the imperialists. Europe is lost, so they also want us to be lost.
Well, there you had Uganda's MPs citing intimidation from the international community over the law, criticizing Western countries for choosing to forcefully transfer the LGBT ideology to Uganda instead of the needed technology transfer to develop the country. Well, America has been on this roll for a while, with Kamala Harris in a 3-day tour of Africa, a 3-nation tour, went to Ghana, stating her position and, about the LGBT ideology. A position that was much berated by Ghana's Speaker of Parliament, Alban Gbagbe. He said what gave America the audacity to push LGBT ideology to Ghana was because leaders had devalued themselves by dependence on seeking aid. Let's take a listen to Kamala Harris and the Ghana Speaker.
Let me be clear about where we stand. First of all, for the American press who are here, you know that a great deal of work in my career has been to address human rights issues, equality issues across the board, including as it relates to the LGBT community. And I feel very strongly about the importance of supporting the freedom and supporting and fighting for equality among all people, and that all people be treated equally. I will also say that this is an issue that we consider, and I consider, to be a human rights issue, and that will not change.
Well, after that, Ghana's speaker came out to make his own comments on the matter. I do wish we could have that soundbite from the Parliament Speaker, Alban Bagbin, slamming Kamala Harris. Let's get to hear that.
That is undemocratic. What is democracy? That somebody else will have to dictate to me as to what is good and what is bad? Unheard of. Because we have decided to devalue ourselves and go a-begging. Come on. We have more than enough. God has created more than enough for every person. I was so happy when I read that Pope Francis directed that no Reverend Father should celebrate over a gay or lesbian marriage. And I said, Roma locuta complete, causa finita.
All right. Okay, let me take our guest right now. I want to thank our guests for joining us. With us on today's edition of The Agenda, we have Honorable Samuel Opio Akuti, Member of Parliament in Uganda, representing Koli North constituency in northern part of Uganda. He serves as the Vice Chairperson of the Committee of Health in Parliament of Uganda and is a member of the ACP Joint Parliamentary Assembly. He's also a pharmacist by training and a pharmacologist by specialization. And he has been at the forefront of advocating for changes to the post-Cotonou Agreement, a document expected to be signed by 107 countries which have provisions that support homosexuality and promotion of abortion. Thank you, Honorable, for responding to the call. It's great to have you on the agenda.
Thank you, Henry.
Oh, thank you, Honorable. We will be looking at issues here as it pertains to your country, Uganda. It's been in the news, the forefront of Western attacks for its position on the LGBTQ ideology. We're looking at Western influence on African culture. What do you explain the imposition of sanctions on a sovereign nation like Uganda by the United States and its allies? Does Uganda owe any allegiance to these nations?
First and foremost, we need to understand is that these sanctions are being issued on the basis of Uganda passing the anti-homosexuality bill into law. This bill is part of our duty as Uganda in terms of protecting our country, the values and the culture. But specifically, we need to understand that there has been a very rampant promotion of homosexuality in our country in the last 10 years. This has been targeting children, vulnerable populations, seeking jobs, seeking scholarships and bursaries. And one of the conditions that they have been putting before them is that when you're a homosexual, then you have a higher guarantee of getting that job or that scholarship. So there's been a homosexualization attempt of our country over the past 10 years. And this triggered for us as a nation to come and say, no, we have a constitution which promotes our cultural values, which needs to be preserved. And we need to take note that I, as a member of parliament, when I took oath of office, I held the constitution of the Republic of Uganda. It was not the constitution of any other country, of any Western country, any Middle East country, any European country. It was the constitution of the Republic of Uganda, and that is what we swore to protect itself. Therefore, the move to put sanctions when we've been executing our constitutional mandate is misplaced. Secondly, the justification that is given that these are human rights violations, we need to know that we have the UN Charter on Human Rights. And within this UN Charter on Human Rights, homosexuality is not a human right included within it. Sexual and reproductive health rights are not provided within that UN Charter. And therefore, the move and the justification being given do not match what the UN Charter provisions provide within that. There's the issue, of course, of our sovereignty. We all know that it's not only in Uganda where there are strong, stringent laws, harsh laws against homosexuality. We've seen it also in the Middle East. And it begins to raise pertinent questions. Why are they putting very tough sanctions on Uganda, but they're not putting the same sanctions on other countries, for example, in the Middle East? Actually, this is no longer an issue of exhibiting double standards, but triple standards of democracy, where the African countries which are poor are being compelled and sanctions are being placed against them for taking an action that is right. Whereas the countries in the Middle East, which are much richer, there's a different standard of democracy that is being applied to them. It is very surprising that the West has taken up this particular approach itself. But again, we need to ask them, the laws that we've passed on the anti-homosexuality is supposed to protect children against this homosexual rape that was rampant and taking place in this country. Are they saying that rape is now a human right by giving out those sanctions? So the message that is being sent out by the Western countries is totally inappropriate. It's really inconsiderate, but it's setting a very bad precedent itself. And we need to also realize that over and above the move of those sanctions itself, we need to appreciate that we are a sovereign state. And over the past many years, we've had a lot of challenges in terms of issues of debt, in terms of issues of trade. And the trades have been coming with a lot of preconditions that you must provide and allow for certain unacceptable practices. I've been at the forefront of what is known as the post-Cotonou Agreement. This is an agreement that is supposed to proceed for the next 20 years, in which 107 countries are supposed to sign. Out of this, there are 79 countries from Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific, and we have the remaining countries from the European Union. And they are saying for us to trade, for us to be able to give you aid, you have to sign this agreement. But when you go into the contents of this agreement, it has clauses that are talking about promotion of sexuality education, and they have defined the curriculum that must be used. When you look at this curriculum, which is a curriculum that has been developed by UNESCO, it has not had any input from any African country. The continents that have given input from it are from other places itself, and they're not from Africa itself. But they're saying that you must promote homosexuality within your teaching, within your schools itself, right from primary, actually right from 5 years of age. The children need to be taught sexuality education, and sexuality education is being defined as sexual orientation, that a child can be born biologically as a male, but can choose to identify themselves as a female, that a child can choose their sexual orientation and decide to be a homosexual. That is their right. But they're even going further to say that the children should be able to rise up and advocate for changes of legislation in their countries itself. This is the level at which the Western influence is now moving. Before, it was a form of just colonialization of resources. But now we are seeing colonialization of culture, colonialization of values, which is totally unacceptable. And that is why Uganda as a country, we put our foot on the ground and we said, let the sanctions come. We will stick to our values. African culture is not for sale, whether on wholesale, whether on retail, whether at factory price. We will stand with our values and we will be rooted. Because if you look at a country as Uganda, 82% are Christians, 14% are Muslims. So that means 96% have a religion that does not support homosexuality. So it's not just an issue of culture, it's also an issue of religion. It's also an issue of constitution, and we are upholding our constitution. I think we have done what we've done for our people, and I think that is what is most important in light of all these sanctions.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Kuti. As we discuss issues, let me remind our viewers, we're talking about the laws, the anti-gay law and Western influence in Africa. based against the backdrop of the anti-gay law that was passed in Uganda recently, where it has been sanctioned by the United States and its allies. And we've been speaking with Honorable Akuti, who's a member of the Ugandan Parliament, just sharing his views here as we discuss around the talking points here: Western influence on African culture, Africa's sovereignty and neo-colonialism, and also the balance of power. Issues which, Honorable Kuti, you've talked about in your position on this matter. But let's look at the response of the international community. Do you toe the line of Ghana's Parliament Speaker, Alban Gbagbe, who says this is somewhat of a Trojan horse for population control?
We need to understand that Africa has one of the fastest growing populations globally. But secondly, also Africa has one of the youngest populations. Actually, 70% of Africa's population is below the age of 30 years and below. That becomes a very fundamental issue, because where there is any attempt to change culture, the youth become the fastest or the first point of contact or the first point of transformation. So we need to understand the geopolitical aspects regarding to that. The other geopolitical aspects, and I'm now speaking as a pharmacist, is on the issue of family planning. We know very well, and I can testify as a pharmacist, that there have been efforts to promote the use of family planning, but also abortion medicines, through some of the settings supported by the Western powers. We cannot rule out that this has been an effort or an attempt to ensure that we reduce on the population growth, because when we build these numbers, then it becomes a threat in terms of numbers of the population itself. So the narrative that this is a mechanism of depopulation, we need to understand that there is no scientific evidence that two men can be able to procreate. It has to be between a man and a woman. So if a man and a man cannot procreate, a woman and a woman cannot procreate, then how are you going to have a population growth? It's going to be a depopulation that's going to take place itself. So scientifically, that is exactly the direction that this will result as a consequence of it. Whether or not it was their intention, the fact of the matter remains that the ultimate consequence and effect of this is depopulation. And that even becomes more suspect when we're able to look at the figures of Africa's fastest growing population. And it's not just a growing population, it's a growing market. And remember, numbers is not only just on market, it also goes into influence to other continents across the globe itself. So I will want to state that, the position from the Ghanaian speaker is really consistent with what even our president has talked about before, that there is no way you can procreate if you're having homosexuality, as a virtue or as a practice that is being advanced in your country.
All right, Honorable Kuti, let's take a breather. Let's hear the viewers hear what your parliament did submit on the bill when it was passed, and we'll be right back.
I know all of us have faced intimidation out there. People being promised to be denied visas, travel restrictions and bans. But we've been able to withstand that.
While I was in the US, I challenged the people I met, especially Africans, that we can see their struggle to defend the right to sexual orientation. But I don't see them defend the right of Africa in, say, transfer of technology like the Chinese are doing. The black race is struggling to transfer homosexuality, not technology, to Africa.
Well, looking at these issues here, you've stated unequivocally that this is Western imposition, kind of imperialism being played out here. But do our leaders understand what is at stake, especially when it is proven and analysts hold that no nation can be great without its population? Do the leaders in Africa understand when this kind of ideologies are being pushed to them? Do they understand the implications, Honorable Akuti?
Yeah, you know, there is a big complexity that the way the information is packaged, the way this ideology is being done is not being done in the open. It's not being done in public. It has been packaged in different forms. Part of it is packaged in form of aid. Another is packaged in form of debt. You know, it's very surprising when you look at many of the agreements, which are known as the economic partnership agreements to promote trade, the development cooperation agreements. You know, there is a component that is being provided, for example, in the post-Cotonou agreement, you know, that we must support human rights. But when you look at the document that has been provided, the reference or the definition of human right is not indicated. It is left open so that there's any opportunity that comes in, it can be defined as they may wish to. Look at the aspect of what they're now calling sexual and reproductive health. They are not presenting it as homosexuality, but actually wherever there's sexual and reproductive health rights, they're actually referring to abortion rights, they're referring to homosexuality rights. So there's a very big challenge, is that this information has been hidden and it needs a very deep eye, a keen eye to be able to go deep and be able to unpack and realize where all this is happening. We need to just understand some interesting statistics. When you look at even just debt, you know, for African countries, the debt to GDP ratio, on average, the debt to GDP ratio for the African countries is about just 50%. That means the economies of Africa are actually much larger than their debt. But go to Europe, the debt to GDP ratio for Europe is averaging at around 93%. Actually, some of the countries are above 100%. That means they have more debt than the size of their economy. The size of their debt is much bigger than the size of their economy. And yet they're saying that Africa is the most indebted country itself. They're saying that Africa is one that needs more aid itself to be able to really get itself out of this situation that it is. So there is a mixture of trade, there's a mixture of aid, there's a mixture of debt that all has been packaged. And that is what is being presented. You know, it is like a watermelon approach. You know, it looks green on the outside, but actually what is inside is red. What the red inside is the homosexuality clauses that are within the agreement. But what is being presented outside is the trade agreements, the aid agreement, the debt that is being provided to these different countries. So I must say there's a very big challenge. I gave the example of the post-Cotonou agreement. Some of the African countries have not realized the danger that they're putting themselves in by proposing and supporting that particular document as it is, because it has very clear clauses. They are hidden clauses. They are captured as gender equality, sexual and reproductive health rights, human rights. But when you go into the core of the documents that they're making references to, that's when you begin to realize that they're referring to homosexuality, they're referring to abortion. So it's a big challenge that many African leaders are not yet fully aware of the dangers that we're putting themselves in. Uganda has come out and said, we shall take the lead from the front so that people can be able to realize that all this is not what looks outside like a watermelon. There is the red that is inside, which is very dangerous for our economies. Now, but I also need to highlight that as, yes, please.
Honorable Kuti, where does this put the continent, especially when it seems that the kind of leaders we've had in the past, and the kind of leaders that we've had in different parts of Africa, are not really interested in looking at the fine lines, more interested in the aid that is coming down the line to pounce on the aid. They're not ready to look at whatever, documents, treaties they are signing, what the implications, the wider implications are. At the end of the day, it becomes too late, because when they've signed this up, how to retract this or repeal this becomes a big issue.
Yeah, what is very, very important at this point in time is that we need champions. We need to be very honest on this. Uganda has chosen to be a champion when it comes to African values and Pan-Africanism itself. But we are also not just becoming champions at our national level, but we want to be the champions at the regional level, to encourage the other blocs not to sign these documents as they are. It's unfortunate, really, that so many has been taken up, and it's because of aid. But when you look at even the aid that we get, the money we lose from corruption as Africa every year is about $89 billion. But the amount of aid that we get in Africa from these Western countries is just $59 billion. So just by fighting corruption, we can be able to reach a point where we do not need the aid that we are crying so much about to help us. It is not aid itself, it is actually disabling us, because it's disabling us from fighting corruption and finding other ways in which we can be able to address it itself. So it's a big burden, it's a very big challenge, but we need to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm happy that Uganda has taken the lead. We're seeing Ghana, we're seeing other countries beginning to open up and say, no, look, we cannot just keep quiet about this. And it's reached a point where now every document now needs to be scrutinized, not just to put a blanket signature itself. But it's also an issue of corruption. We need to realize as a continent, corruption is costing us. It is costing us our economy, it is costing us our values, it's costing us our culture, it's costing us our lives now, because the issues of depopulation, So we need to really come out and realize that if we don't address this, we are going to be wiped out, as an African race itself.
Is there a threat? Where should I even start? But first of all, let me commend you, Honorable Akuti, because a lot of Africans, it would be heartwarming to hear from you what you're saying right now, giving us a different narrative of what has been in the past, where leaders are just there for themselves, but really understand the wider implications and really want to see the continent come out of the doldrums. That's why I asked this question, that despite the fact that about 30 nations in Africa have these laws in place, these anti-gay laws in place, it looks like Uganda has been isolated and left to go it alone. Do you see the blocs like the African Union? Do we stand up for each other? Or is the inimical Berlin Conference fallout still playing out in Africa, where Africa was chopped into different smaller pieces, and these smaller African nations are allowed to deal with this of superpowers on their own?
One of the challenges that we've seen, even within the ACP, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, European Union agreement, this new agreement is coming up with a new proposal that instead of Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific gathering together and negotiating common positions when they are engaging the EU, they are now breaking into blocks of Africa, Caribbean, and also Pacific. But even within Africa, we've broken ourselves into blocks. We've seen where we've gone for meetings, and the discussions are on, we have the Southern African bloc, we have the Eastern African bloc, we have the Central, we have the Western African bloc, we have the Northern African bloc. So Africa is still very much divided itself. But even in the midst of this division, I think we should not lose hope, because it takes one matchstick to light fire into a whole forest, It can take just one country to light that new fire of unity, that new fire of our values, of our culture itself, and ensure that we protect it as much as it may look so difficult. And this is not the first time. Uganda has been really at the forefront of pushing for some of these provisions itself, and we think that as much as we may not be as isolated as that, if you recall, and you can just give information that just 2 months back, before the president assented to this bill, we had a conference in Africa, in Uganda, where we had about 25 African countries that came together, and these were not just individuals, but these were high-profile individuals from different countries in Africa. Some were speakers, others were members of parliament, and they made that resolution that we need to come together and ensure we do not sign this post-Cotonou agreement or these agreements that are forcing on us cultures and values that are not consistent with our constitution and way of life. So as much as we may say that, yes, other countries have been quiet, we're beginning to see others beginning to come up. Malawi was very, very strong and has been very supportive with us. Zambia has also come out very, very clear. Tanzania has also come out very, very clear. So the numbers are beginning to increase. We may have started as Uganda, but we hope that we can see these numbers increase and come together and put a very strong force itself. Because if we do not listen right now, then and do not stand with each other, then when they come for the others, there will be no Uganda to stand with you. Right now, Uganda can stand with you. We need the other countries to also stand with us. But if we do not stand with each other, then no one will be able to stand for the other at the end of it, because we'll have been wiped out, not just as a country, but as a whole race itself. So it's a very pertinent issue that needs to be looked at. But also, we need to understand the complexity that we are going into. We've started with the concept of sexual orientation, which is looking at homosexuality. But there are practices of also bestiality, These are other kinds of orientation that are now beginning to crop up itself, And if we do not address this right now, then it will become so difficult for us as Africa, really, to even live the most basic of our lives itself. And it's not just going to affect the poor, even the rich are going to be impacted, because if the sanctions, I'll give an example, some of the sanctions that are being fronted is on human rights violation is actually to stop the exports of coffee to their countries, cocoa, tea, and various other vegetables and fruit products itself. That means that there's a move to try and use a blackmail through trade, So we need to really get a workable solution to this. Part of this solution is actually ensuring that we improve trade amongst each other, because only 16% of Africa's trade is amongst each other.
When you talk about trade, Africa definitely has the largest bloc, the 52 nations. I mean, we're talking about over 1.2 billion people. And with the advent of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which seems slow to kick off. Of course, we certainly hope we'll see the lights of day if the interference, as you've pointed out, from the West can be stemmed. It can actually put Africa in a better position to trade within itself. So we see the advantage, and how we deal with the West. We deal with the West from a point of advantage, a point where we are the ones who believe that we have what to offer. How do you see that relationship changing anytime soon? Because Ghanaian parliamentarian speaker did point out that because African leaders keep going cap in hand to the West seeking for aid, this has put them in a compromised position. It's something the Rwandan President Paul Kagame has also cited in some of his speeches.
Yeah, one of the ways to really couple this is that we have been going on a begging on the table, because we have not ensured that with the resources that we have, we've used them to do the negotiation. We've mainly just done negotiation of giving them our raw materials. We need to recognize that they need our coffee, they need our tea, they need our fruits, they need our vegetables. But so we have what they need, We even have the minerals, the resources. Look at all these semiconductor industries, the electronic sector itself, all the minerals, all the components are coming in from Africa. So we are not poor, we are rich. But the issue is, how have we negotiated the rich that we have to ensure that we can get what we don't have itself? That's where there's a very, very big gap that is coming in. But you see, even with the coming in of this continental free trade agreement itself, the current trade amongst each has been 16%. But I must say that is increasing. If you look at Uganda right now, the trade that we are having with Tanzania and the trade that we are having with Kenya is actually has grown almost twofold over the last 3 to 4 years itself. So if there is a concerted effort, at the level of the Africa Union, at the level of the Pan-Africa Parliament, at the level of the East African blocs, we can be able to drive a new agenda and begin to see some change trickling out of it. But also, we can ensure that we control the terms. I can tell you, Uganda, as we speak right now, we discovered oil, but we made a decision as a country that we will not export the crude oil. We are going to export the refined oil itself. And so the refineries are being set up in Uganda itself. The investments have to be made within Uganda itself. Even for the coffee, we're no longer looking at just exporting the coffee bean. We want to export the processed coffee, the value-added coffee that we're going to export. Not the cotton, but the textile and the garments itself. That is the direction that we need to take, because for every cotton that we export or coffee, we are actually creating employment in those Western countries itself in form of value addition, because those are where the factories are. So we are seeing that we need to bring the factories back to Africa. If we do that, then we'll be able to create the employment, we'll be able to fight the poverty, we'll be able to ensure that we are as competitive as those countries itself, but we'll have more negotiation power itself amongst us. It is something that we need to address. But I must say that this has also been complicated by the wars that have been taken up within Africa itself. We need to ensure that there's security for us to be able to achieve all that. So it is more than just coming together through these agreements as Africa. We need to ensure that security is also a fundamental element. Production and manufacturing becomes a very fundamental element of our country. But also we must agree as a bloc. Bloc negotiations is very, very critical.
Well, thank
for us
you.
to be able to
Honorable Kuti, let's take some reactions on the advent of this gay bill, this anti-gay bill from Ugandans, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
It's not what we need right now. The kind of rights, we cannot be talking about such rights when fundamental rights, like human rights, rights to access to education, access to health services. We have not fought for such rights, and we go for that other right.
If sanctions can affect a country like Russia, then who are we to say like we're not going to be like affected by it?
Looking at some leaders in Africa who have also registered their dismay and their rejection to this ideology, gay ideology. In 2015, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta clashed with Barack Obama during a joint news conference, saying Kenyan society did not support the ideology. And in 2020 rather, Senegal's President Macky Sall defended the country's criminalization of homosexuality, telling visiting Canadian Prime Minister that his country was not comfortable with those laws. Well, it is certain, definitely certain that African leaders are rising up to the occasion, and we really need to see more of this. Maybe we can take a soundbite right now, and we'll be right back.
Not because of any harm they're doing anybody, but because they're different. That's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode. And bad things happen. And when a government gets in the habit of treating people differently, those habits can spread. If somebody is a law-abiding citizen who is going about their business and working in a job and obeying the traffic signs and doing all the other things that good citizens are supposed to do, and not harming anybody, the idea that they are going to be treated differently or abused because of who they love is wrong. Full stop.
Just like President Obama, I think we also need to be able to speak frankly about some of these things. And the fact of the matter is that Kenya and the United States, we share so many values. Our common love for democracy, entrepreneurship, value for families. These are things that we share. But there are some things that we must admit we don't share. Our culture, our societies don't accept. It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue. We want to focus on other areas that are day-to-day living for our people. The health issues that we have discussed with President Obama, these are critical. Issues of ensuring inclusivity and of women, a huge section of society that is normally left out of the mainstream of economic development. What we can do in terms of infrastructure, what we can do in terms of education, in terms of our roads, in terms of giving our people power, encouraging entrepreneurship. These are the key focuses. Maybe once, like you have, overcome some of these challenges, we can begin to look at new ones. But as of now, the fact remains that this issue is not really an issue that is on the foremost mind of Kenyans, and that is the fact.
We cannot ask Senegal to say tomorrow we legalize homosexuality and tomorrow is gay parades. That's not possible either, because our society doesn't accept it. Society will evolve. It will take as long as it takes. I believe that even in northern countries, this debate isn't totally exhausted.
All right, and we're back in time for us to wrap this up with Honorable Kuti. Honorable Kuti, we've said quite a lot. There's so much to unpack on this that we can't do on one program. But going forward, with the challenge posed by the large funds that Africa has to contend with the West pumping funds into sponsoring these vile bills into Africa, what do you think should be the response?
Yeah, the response really is what we have stated before. But before even going into that, I just wanted to add that just yesterday,
any particular strategies
Cameroon,
that you suggest, especially at the highest level, like blocks like the AU, are these kind of discussions we are having about the West trying to push its ideology to Africa being put on the forefront of discussion?
Yes, one of the avenues which we can be able to take up, and this is something that we're trying to drive, is that negotiations on trade should be based on trade. It should be trade for trade. It should be aid based on the need. It should not be aid that is based on fulfillment of another country's interests or personal wishes itself. But also sovereignty must be respected. And even when you sit on the negotiating table, we must sit as partners. We must not sit under an arrangement of perception of a colonial master and a colonial country that has been colonized. So these are new values that we need to develop, because we've so much developed values of negotiating aid based on other interests, negotiating trade based on other interests. If Uganda has coffee that it wants to sell the UK and UK needs that coffee, then that should be the basis of discussion. You cannot bring coffee on the table and then you also bring homosexuality. That's a totally different issue itself. So we need to change the basis on which negotiations are done for trade. We also need to come up with basis for discussions when it comes to aid. It should be based on need, based on humanitarian challenges that a country may be facing. Issues of homosexuality should not be mixed into it. And one of the approaches that can be achieved is that the different blocs can come up with resolutions, joint resolutions. The regional blocs such as the Pan-African Parliament, the African Union, can come up with these joint resolutions and agree that, moving forward, this is how Africa is going to trade with Europe. That's what the Middle East has done. They have set their terms, of engagement. They have set the rules of engagement. But we got into the game without the rules of the engagement. And in the end, we've been swallowed up with their rules itself. So that is one of the fundamental points that we need to take as far as that is concerned. And then also insist and ensure that we need to fight corruption. The aid that we are receiving of 59 billion, if we fought corruption, we'll be able to save 89 billion that we lose on corruption, and we will not need that aid itself. And then lastly, the trade needs to be intensified, and we need more policies, we need more words put into action towards that direction.
Well, Honorable Akuti, Samuel Akuti, the Parliament of Uganda representing Kole North constituency, thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the program. It's been great having you.
Thank you.
Well, that's how it's been on the program. That's the size of the show. We've been talking about issues of Uganda's anti-gay law and Western influence in Africa. It is definitely certain that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. It will call for a concerted effort from African leaders to unite against this surge of imperialism on the continent. I'll leave you on that note, saying thank you so much for joining us on the agenda. My name is Henry Williams. See you same time on the station. Bye-bye.